So Hansford, you come from a very unique musical background with this whole family of musicians and bands that is gone. That started with one band very long time ago and has actually mushroomed into festivals.
Yeah.
Styles of music.
Yeah, it was a very messy evolution.
Yeah. Launched a lot of important careers.
There were funny branches.
And I think that a lot of people who know about you, a lot of people who know about a lot of the people in this coming out of this family don't really understand what it is and the interconnections.
Yeah.
So I think it will be very interesting to hear about what that is and how.
I can sort of sum it up, but it is it's one of those late '60s psychedelic groups that kept growing and kept living, and I guess spawned several famous guys, more famous than I. There's the original gong was a Canterbury English with French guys, Didier Malherbe and David Allen and Steve Hillage, and there were 3 iconic records from that period, which are great, called You and Camembert Electrique.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the first big formation. After that,
Well, let me ask you this: is it fair to say that David Allen is the founder and instigator of it, or is it more complicated than that?
He is considered the founding father. Yeah, those were the Flying Teapot days.
Yeah,
and it predates me. I joined in the second big evolution when it changed from to jazz rock. It changed
exactly.
Yeah.
And one thing I think is very interesting to point out also that this is even at the founding of the record label Virgin.
That's right.
Gong was one of the first acts signed to Virgin, and one of the reasons to build the studio that Virgin used to record in.
That's true.
And of course, Virgin. Everybody knows Richard Branson, who is now the big
king of the world.
King of the world, and he was part of this whole.
I met him. He lent me 300 pounds once, yes, which I paid back.
That's good. Okay, so continue. So basically, I had this hippie band.
Well, it's good that you bring that up, because also Mike Oldfield, who is the true. He put Virgin on the map with Tubular Bells, and I had a chance to tour with him during that period also. We were signed to Virgin with Branson when the band evolved into the jazz rock formation that I was just saying. That was Pierre Morlin was the leader, the drummer, who died a few years ago. And Alan Holsworth played guitar. We had lots of good guests, English guests in those days, Mick Taylor, Mike Oldfield, Steve Winwood, because of Virgin and the English connections. And Mike, who was very big then with Tubular Bells, was taking off in the gong rhythm section, which was Pierre, myself, Pierre's brother on vibes, Benoit Marlin, as a basic core foundation for his touring band. And so those were heady days, with Virgin, and we had an English manager. Out of that, Alan went off to do many things, a lifetime. And
one thing that I think could be very interesting to know also is that David Allen founded the group, and Pierre came in as a drummer.
He was the drummer.
And then, for reasons that I haven't quite understood yet, but David actually left the group that he founded.
Yeah.
And Pierre took over the baton.
That's when I joined, and I don't know the exact dynamics of that whole thing. It had been very successful, but there were other big stars in the band besides Dave Allen. There was Steve Hillage and Tim Blake, a keyboardist at the time, and it had reached a culmination of some sort, of which I'm not entirely aware of all the dynamics.
Right. No,
and they actually stopped their Virgin deal. This is mid-'70s, like about 76. And when I met Pierre in New York, we reformed with several of the older members, the band. It was more instrumental and more jazz rock, and re-signed to Virgin at that time.
As Gong.
As Pierre Morlin's Gong.
Pierre Morlin's Gong.
And then all those. There was Mother Gong and
also it was also New York Gong.
New York Gong.
Dave Allen went over to New York, and he played with people who became immensely influential. People like Bill Laswell, who was in there.
I know.
A lot of the people around him.
Yeah, there's some connection with you in that.
Yeah. And then of course I worked a lot with Bill.
Yeah.
At that time.
He's supposed to be coming to the custom shop in New York soon to visit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. And then, but the big band associated with you and that whole family is of course Gongzilla.
Well, one of the original guitar players, Bon Lazaga, and I formed Gongzilla with the intention of carrying on the jazz rock kind of lineage in the mid '90s, '94 or something it was, and we played with Pierre, with Benoit, with Alan, also on the first record. And we worked that for about 14 years. Yeah, it's still ongoing now. Yeah.
Yeah. And how does all this play out geographically?
Well, Gongzilla is considered American.
Right.
In the old days, Pierre Molin's Gong was considered kind of French English. I was the American in the band, but it was.
So you actually lived in Europe?
Yeah, in Paris or in London at that time.
And what made you move back? And what happened?
Well, we came to our own end also in the early '80s. We had done a kind of there's this sort of 5-year success arc of many bands, that seems to be, you either transform at the end of that 5 years or you break up. And we had switched to Arista, and Arista dropped us in '81, it was. Jazz rock had sort of, you know the history.
Course,
yeah. Which is not necessarily a bad thing. It had its heyday. Yeah.
And how does this lead up to the present day? What's left?
Well,
where have you transitioned now? What's the
it was with Gong that I first saw a Warwick bass. I was on tour in Germany in 1986 and saw a thumb similar to this one. And that's when I met Woody and Hans Peter and started my relationship with Warwick. I've been an endorser ever since. Well, today I do Gongzilla, and I've started a project with Jordy Torrance, who's a FRAMUS endorser, which is more of a acoustic project. That's about it.
Okay. Yeah. So these are your two main.
That's it.
projects,
Yeah.
So Gongzilla is still.
Yeah.
So you're still a gongster basically.
It's
part of that family.
It's amazing how these things endure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I just find it a very fascinating phenomenon.
Well, it's a cult kind of phenomenon. It's not because we were so famous, but there's a cult kind of perpetual.
And that is worldwide, and there are festivals, and there are so many bands, and there's so many curious. It's a very interesting part of modern, or let's say progressive music. And I'm saying progressive, I don't mean prog rock or something like that, but progressive as developing as pushing the envelope of music. Okay, so you mentioned you saw this Warwick bass while on tour, and you met Woody Wallen and Hans Peter, and you came on board. Wait, why?
Well, the look was the first thing, honestly.
Look, okay.
I saw a wooden thumb bass like this, a natural one. And I had never seen a bass like that. It was absolutely gorgeous. It was sitting on the floor of a store, I forget what town in Germany. And I asked the guy about it, and then Woody came to a show, and they played great. And the second thumb I got back then in the '80s is still my favorite bass, which I play all the time. Yeah. Fantastic instrument. And they have become iconic now, as you know.
But is there anything particular about the sound, about the playability? What is it that?
Well, I can just, maybe if I take 2 seconds, I was already in trouble because when I was just before I joined Gong, even when I was in my 21 or something in New York, I already had a fretless made for myself. This is '74, and I played some sessions in New York, and nobody they even called the electric bass in those days a Fender. In the listing for the Union, there was acoustic bass. You remember?
I know.
Yeah,
I remember that.
there was, and then Fender.
Yeah.
And so when I would bring the fretless, it would sustain too much, and it freaked everybody out. Yeah. So when I had played wall for a while, which you also know very well. Yeah. They were great basses, but when I came across the thumb and the sustain and the general power of the mid-range and just the quality, it was perfect for me.
Yeah, very cool. The last topic I would like to approach here is we have this beautiful example here of something that will confuse the hell out of most people. When they look at it, they will go say,
I know.
"What on earth is that?" And you can best explain it.
It's proof of Warwick's courage and actual putting their money where their mouths are in terms of innovation, in my opinion. In the early 90s, I think it was actually 90, I asked Warwick to help me with my interest in alternate tuning systems based on the harmonic series. And that's what these frets give me access to all notes from the harmonic series, as opposed to using 12-tone and dividing the octave up into equal steps. And this is a second prototype, which they brought from the factory for the Frankfurt Mesa for me. There's a third one, a streamer, which is the one I use regularly when I play with this small group of enthusiasts for alternate tuning systems, of which I've become a staunch member over the 20 years or so of doing this. But you know, the source of the notes is the harmonic series, so you need to play with other instruments tuned or who have access to those notes if they're fretless and so forth. But it's not nearly so daunting as the fretboard makes it seem. I have tried to spread the word of other very in-tune sounding notes that nature has given us besides those 12, but it's not that easy.
Okay, but explain, people who don't even understand that there is such a thing as even the tempered scale, and that
Yeah.
all keyboards and all guitars are actually tuned to this tempered scale. Explain the musical advantages or the musical attraction of playing with this kind of...
I guess I didn't know it either. You do, but when I discovered alternate tuning system, and I don't mean open tuning systems, I mean actually using other notes than are available on a piano, ones that you don't have in 12-tone, I felt a bit embarrassed because God didn't give us those notes. You know, it's a system that came together a couple hundred years ago around Bach's time so that we could have a common source, a common way of notating and using between orchestras in Europe primarily, and it has spread ever since. And Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Si, Do is the pervasive system. A very good system, obviously, but it is 12 notes out of an infinity of notes between the root and an octave, you know, as on a fretless. These notes come from the overtone series of the harmonic series, same thing. These naturally occurring notes in nature that anything that vibrates will manifest. Just like when you pluck a string and touch it, you get a harmonic. The advantage is musically, first, is that it's very, very in tune with the instrument itself, with the string's natural tendency to divide itself at half of its length, a third of its length, and so forth. The nodes of the harmonics. Then also you have the second aspect, which is you can expand the language a little bit. You can have more kinds of intervals, you know. So that are also legitimately derived from nature, but which you can't even simulate on the piano because they're just not there to play. That's it.
Exactly. And one thing I would like to add to that for people to understand is one of the big reasons they made this equal division of the octave is that so you can play equally in all keys.
That's right.
On the piano.
That was the first primary reason.
Because if it was tuned perfectly in C, in C, if you try to go to F sharp, it would sound like a cat screaming. And so that's
exactly.
But by dividing it equally, everything is equally out of tune.
It's equally compromised.
Yeah.
Yes.
And actually, I actually suggest to everybody to go to a piano, play an interval, and actually listen carefully and realize that it's actually not in tune. Which is pretty amazing because we all accept this kind of out of tune system for hundreds of years, as you say.
Yeah.
And if you really try to play something in tune, you will have a very aha experience. So, I thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonas. It's a pleasure.